It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do do do.
Good afternoon and welcome to Spirit Cafe. I'm your co-host, Barbara Schreiner-Trudell, and of course, Cheryl Rogers, my other host. And we are so excited to be here with you today. I want to say I left a little early last week. My apologies. I wasn't feeling well. And then as I logged off, I got an urgent prayer request. So my apologies for leaving quickly, but you know, these things happen. All right, well, let us begin with the land acknowledgement. And as we gather from many places on Turtle Island, we as settlers are grateful for the opportunity to meet here. And we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years, including the Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous people. And our guest today is grateful to live and play and work on the traditional territory of the Hopewell people. And although I'm not a person of African descent, I'm committed to continually acting in support of and in solidarity with Black communities seeking freedom and reparative justice in light of the history and ongoing legacy of slavery that continues to impact Black communities in Canada and the US. We acknowledge the contributions made by both in shaping and strengthening our communities and our countries. And by making this acknowledgement, we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. We recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality, for we are one. Well, our guest today is a rock star in the unity movement. The Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselbeck is with us. And for 10 years, he was Dean of Instruction for the Spiritual Education and Enrichment Program with Unity. He brings his joyful and passionate presence to his classes and presentations, both nationally and internationally. And I've been in his class, and it is awesome. He is the author of 8 books, including Heart-Centered Metaphysics, a deeper look at Unity teaching, and the main text for the teaching of metaphysics in the Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute. Paul challenges students with a lively and engaging style and an infectious enthusiasm. Paul makes an open, difficult subject impossibly fun. Yes, he does. And so welcome, Paul. We're so grateful that you're here.
And I'm so grateful for the writer who wrote that when I was a guest speaker at Unity of Santa Rosa.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome. It's well said.
It is.
Well
I mean, it captures me and it humbles me. And sometimes I get a little embarrassed.
Well, I've been your student. And so I got to say, it's all fact. And I got 2 of your books sitting right here, one on the 12 powers and the other Heart-Centered Metaphysics. And they're both phenomenal.
Thank you.
And so I wanted to open up the conversation today with a quote that I read recently by a British writer by the name of G.K. Chesterton. And he said, "Christianity has not failed. It just hasn't been tried yet."
Oh my God.
So as a minister, how do you feel about that?
I call that pinning the tail on the donkey.
And I just want to remind people as a unity minister, right? Because, Paul is the master of metaphysics, which is one of the things I love about him. So, Paul, when you hear that, what comes to mind?
When I hear I'm a master of metaphysics?
No, when you hear the quote that Barbara just said.
Okay. Well, so I have to agree with it to a certain extent. And I would have to ask a question. I'd have to ask him, what does he mean by Christianity? And is it the Christianity of the Apostle Paul? Is it simply the teachings of Jesus, or whatever it is? I know people have tried various smatterings of the teachings, but I don't know if I know of anybody who has actually put all of it into practice.
Yeah, I don't know too many people who have, that's for sure. But I have met a couple who actually live their spiritual path in a really deep and remarkable way. And I'm in awe of that, But I think, he's speaking more about more traditional type churches, and how sometimes church can get in the way of our spiritual path or our recognition of oneness. That's how it kind of landed for me. Is I've met a lot of people who call themselves Christians, but who are acting in a way that maybe isn't, in my mind, very Christian.
And I
And
don't
to
think.
me,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Cheryl.
Well, to me, what that is saying is that we haven't listened, we haven't heard what Jesus said and what he came here for. And instead of living by his teachings and the things that he really showed us, we have made Christianity into something else.
Yeah. And I don't know of a Christian that believes in oneness like we do.
No.
And wait a minute, let me clarify that, because when I say we're one or we're oneness, I mean in our divinity, we're identical.
Yes.
And in our humanity, I celebrate our distinctions because we are each expressing uniquely. And so we're identical in our divinity.
Yes.
But I'm not you, you're not me, and you're probably glad you're not me, and vice versa.
I'm just glad I have more hair, that's all.
Amen to that.
Barbara.
You can probably count the scars I have up here from hitting things.
So one of the areas I'd love us to move into is something that you mentioned in an email about what religion and spirituality may have gotten wrong.
Yeah.
And so seeing as we're talking about that, the Christian understanding of Jesus's teachings, I thought that would be a great next question. What did religion and spirituality maybe get wrong?
Well, so all of this is, in my opinion, some of it proven in my life, or actually most of it. I mean, I don't teach something that I don't live, first of all. And I think that's an important thing for a minister or a licensed unity teacher, or for anybody who's on a journey of finding. I think it's really important to live, or at least be going in the direction of leaning towards and doing what we teach. So the first thing, that really big thing I question, and wow, I don't know where to start with this, because fundamentally, the founders of New Thought questioned the answers that Christianity had. And they were asking, what did they get wrong? Or what if Christianity got it wrong? Mm-hmm. And that's what I say here. What if I've gotten something wrong? So when I first heard this phrase, I heard this phrase in the context of two people being in a heated discussion. And an outsider asked them, what if one of you've gotten it wrong? Mm-hmm. And so I use that now when I'm in a discussion with somebody. Mm-hmm. If I think I'm really right, I stop and ask myself, what if I'm wrong here? Let me listen. Let me listen a little more carefully. And that has been helpful. Mm-hmm. So I've questioned a lot of the teachings in unity, and I would say then in a general way of New Thought. But one of the teachings that permeates spirituality and permeates religion is the concepts or the beliefs around fear. And so mostly we're taught fear is the opposite of love. Fear is something to be avoided, to get over in some way. Well, a few months back, well, maybe a year now, when I was speaking at Unity of Dallas, I was working on this idea of love and fear. And suddenly I realized that fear is not the opposite of love. In fact, fear cannot exist without love. Now, to some people, that might be blowing their circuits, and that's fine. But think about this. When we're fearful, aren't we fearful of something we love being harmed or damaged in some way? Now, if we're fearful about something happening to ourselves, it's ourselves that we love. It could be something we own, like our car or our house. It could be family member. It could be friends. But I realized I'm really only fearful when I perceive something I love is going to be harmed in some way.
Mhm.
And so now what that does, it converts it to fear is the evidence of love's presence. Fear is evidence of love's presence. So now that gives me a tool. Anytime I notice I'm fearful, I now ask myself, what do I love in relation to what I'm afraid of? And that shifts the energy. That shifts the energy away from the fear towards what I'm loving, which I think is more productive.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And Fiona has said in the chat, perhaps fear can generate resiliency.
Well, so all fear, so I think that's true. And I don't think all fear is bad.
No, I
Right.
don't.
Right? I mean,
So, from what you said, the word I like is it's a tool.
it's a
Right?
tool. Yes.
It's a tool, because when you first said it, my thought went to, well, if I don't fear, does it mean I'm not demonstrating love? But the key here is that this is a tool for when I am in fear, to look at what is it that I'm fearful about. What love direction does that go in?
Yes. So another way to put it is, since fear is here, what am I loving that I think is threatened?
Yes,
What
exactly.
am I loving
Yes.
that I think is threatened?
Beautiful. That's
And
what I was trying to say.
and this doesn't happen very much anymore, but since I made this discovery for myself, when I'm working with somebody and they say, look, Paul, I have no problem loving everybody else. I just can't love myself. My next question is, are you ever fearful that something's going to happen to you?
Mm.
And he or she says, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I say, that's the evidence you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you didn't love yourself, you wouldn't be fearful.
You wouldn't
Wow.
care.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting way of putting it. I like it. I like
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah. And I like what you said about the religion and spirituality, you know, that because I think sometimes when we look at religion and what maybe we've gotten wrong or whatever, I think, you know, that comment that you said, that when you're in discussion with somebody and maybe there's some disagreement, how you're willing to question, could I be right? Like, am I wrong or am I
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I love that, because that opens up curiosity, which allows us to actually discover the other person in a much deeper and more meaningful way by being willing to listen with a really open heart.
Yes.
And I think the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. I don't
Well,
think we're ever absolutely right.
yeah. And I often say, like, when I'm talking to a friend or something, and you know, and I say things and they think it's so wonderful, I end with, and I could be wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Because who knows, right? And
Yeah.
for me, at the end of the day, there is no right and wrong. It's really just what we believe. And
Yeah.
what is the belief, right? It's a thought, words that we just keep repeating over and over and over again. And so, to me, it doesn't matter whether we're right or wrong. What matters is who we be and how we live our lives.
So that is the bottom line. And for
Yes.
me, generally a belief is not something that's provable.
Right.
Okay, so the contrast to the belief is something I know. Okay, so for example, I know, which is at this one here, this rectangle is blue. And so for me, there's no discussion around that. That's blue. However, if the person can't see blue, well, then they might be right. I've probably would have been better to choose red, because I'm saying this is red, but a person who's colorblind would see in grays. So this black and white, blue and red, and what's right and what's wrong, it can still be a little fishy. But there are things that are more like facts rather than beliefs. And when we're talking about spirituality and religion, we are playing in the playpen of beliefs.
Yes.
To an extent, because I really think that now spirituality and science are closer than they've ever been. When you look at quantum physics, when you look at things like that, I think that spirituality is really in some areas starting to be proven, in fact.
Yes, and sometimes disproven.
Yeah.
And so this tug of war between religion, spirituality, and science really can be traced back to Galileo, because he challenged that the sun didn't go around the earth, that in fact the earth went around the sun, and he got into the doo-doo with the Inquisition, and he was actually confined to his home for 10 years. And there is some belief that because he was confined to his home for 10 years, that he is considered the father of science and all kinds of things. But that is really the point at which religion and spirituality got at odds with each other.
Yeah.
And I say spirituality to be inclusive of religion. Okay. And so I think one of the things that the founders of New Thought did was they challenged religion. And so they excommunicated themselves away from religion. But I can speak for sure from Charles Fillmore. He believed in science. He believed that science and unity, or science and New Thought, should not be separate. And in fact, you can find evidence in his lessons of quoting people, even the people who were nascent quantum physicists before they were even designated that way. So it's an interesting history, but we certainly don't separate religion from science.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I loved that Charles said, and he's one of the co-founders of Unity, is I reserve the right to change my mind.
Yes.
Like that for me is just key about growth. Both mentally, physically, and spiritually, is that I can reserve the right to change my mind. Yeah. And I think if he was here today, oh my gosh, I think he would be in his element.
Yeah, and he'd be really old too.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
But to have these conversations, and then to even have conversations with Greg Braden or Bruce Lipton or Nassim. There's this scientist now that Greg's working with that's just amazing. I don't remember his last name right now. And I think about the things that are coming out in those areas of science, which to me just align perfectly with what we talk about in creation, and how we co-create with our thoughts, words, and actions.
So I agree with that mostly. And we still have to look at what they're saying with a critical eye or an analytical eye.
Right.
So I'm basically a scientist because
Mhm.
that's where my training was before I became a unity minister. And I see what some of these people write about, citing scientific discoveries, and that information they provide is true, but sometimes they extrapolate too far of what that means for new
Mm.
thought or religion, and we got to be really careful about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Discern.
I love that both, whether it's Center for Spiritual Living or Unity, that there is right from the foundation, there was that idea of being open at the top,
Yes.
that
Yes.
this teaching will evolve, that it
Yeah.
must evolve. Because evolution is, I mean, everything is growth, right?
Yeah.
In spiritual, there's that law of growth. Everything is moving forward or it is moving the other way. So we want to always be open. And I think that's been a challenge for some people sometimes to be okay with saying things slightly differently than what they were in the beginning,
Mm.
Yeah.
using a little more modern language. Like I love the way you wrote the 12 powers to put it like, putting Fillmore's words and then putting your interpretation of those. That for me really helped me to understand
Mhm.
it. I didn't.
Yes.
And it was really valuable.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you. And that was my purpose. And part of my purpose of putting Fillmore's quotes alongside of mine is to say he said this, but he didn't say it in those words, because when people hear it in my words without Fillmore's, they think I'm changing Fillmore. Well, first of all, I have no problem with changing Fillmore. Okay. If there's good reason, we change Fillmore. But the one of the challenges all organizations have, but especially in the realm of spirituality, is that there will always be people pushing back, and
Yes.
that's part of the process.
Mhm.
And to live with that and find a way to accommodate that so that we can expand and grow, because what they do is prevent a person like me from going too far.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so there's like a check and balance going on here. And I
Right.
think so when I was dean, I didn't choose the other instructors to believe like I did. I chose instructors that I knew believed differently in some ways. And that was so when the students went through the program, if they came on campus, they got a variety of point of views.
Yeah.
And so then they get to choose. But sometimes we had students say, well, isn't there one belief? And I go, well, not so much. You get to choose. We're going to say things similarly and distinctly. And we know you have the intelligence to discern what works for you.
I think that's one of the most important things about New Thought is we don't lay down laws, rules, and regulations to say, here's how you have to be acceptable to us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What we're saying is you're unique in your own expression of life and living, and finding that and giving that into the world is of the most value. So question,
Yes.
question.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so one of my things is we have to be in a state of questioning our unquestioned answers. I'll say that again, questioning our unquestioned answers, because it's our unquestioned answers that can hold us back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, me too.
I'll tell you, you have a turn of phrase that always causes me to think.
Yeah.
I think that's why I loved your class so much. It was like, let me just
Well,
ponder
so
that.
all of my classes aren't actually designed to do this, but they do this. It's to invite critical thinking.
Yeah.
And that's important to the growth of the movement, as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
That's essential as a minister.
Yes.
If you can't sit in the question, if you can't explore things from a new perspective, then I think that limits our ability as ministers
Yes.
to actually be with the people that we are meant to serve. that we have to do it with an open heart and a critical mind so that we can be clear.
And curiosity.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a short break, go to the commercial break, and then we will be right back. You're watching Spirit Cafe, and our guest, the Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselbeck, and of course, my wonderful co-host, my beloved sister from another mother, Cheryl. We will be back in just a minute. Don't go away.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
Well, welcome back. You are watching Spirit Cafe with the wonderful Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselbeck. One of my, honestly, just, I'm going to say favorite teachers, people to have conversations with. I've loved the classes that I've been in with you, Reverend Paul. I think I've done the 12 Powers with you more than once. And, you know, I know that even in those classes, every time I join one, I will learn something new and something different because it is an expansion of thinking and challenging ourselves on a continual basis, which is what I love.
Yeah, and so often students will ask, well, how'd I get where I am? How'd I get all this knowledge? By teaching it over and over. I can't tell you how many times I've taken the 12 Powers. Because every time I take it, I learn and see something new.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. With all these New Thought classes, and probably with many classes in general, you know, I know that even if I read a book, if I read it again, I'll pick up something that I probably missed the first time I read it. So I think it's a good thing to be willing to go over things.
Yes. So let me give you a point of view on that. So when that happens with a book, you didn't miss something. You didn't see it from the consciousness you were at that time. And then when you go to the book again, you see different things because you've changed. So I can never read the same book twice because I'm different moment to moment. And the more time. Yes. And, you know, there's that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I say, when the student is ready, the teacher is apparent.
Oh, I like that.
See,
I love
so
that.
when I'm ready, I can see the teacher.
Yes.
But
yes,
if I'm not ready, I don't want any of that,
yes,
right?
yes,
And it's right for me.
yes.
And
I
so
love that.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
What it's making me think about as well is this when we say we attract things. This is something that I think we've discussed before as well, is that it's not so much that we are attracting or creating, it's already there. But what we are doing is raising our vibration. When we raise our consciousness, we get to see it,
Yes.
which is more, rather than saying we are bringing it to us.
Yes. And
We'll see it
then
when we believe it.
then whatever it is we're seeing, we bring ourselves to that.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so what I say is I can think and have the idea and love to have dark chocolate right now and really feel it and have the vibration of dark chocolate, but it's never going to be here until I go to the store and buy it.
Mhm.
And so I don't attract chocolate to me. I'm attracted to chocolate. And we do the same thing with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Except that somebody might just knock on your door and bring you some dark chocolate.
Well, so if that happens randomly, I will accept the dark chocolate. But here's the thing. That happens so infrequently, it can't be a law.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
the
an
laws are
accident,
exact and
basically.
consistent.
So what we're talking about is things we can predictively use on a day-to-day basis. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, these random things happen. Hallelujah. I don't even know how they happen.
Yeah.
But then to go through my life expecting someone to knock on my door and give me a new car and give me a husband or a wife.
Yeah. No.
I'm going to be waiting a long time.
Right.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that for me also makes me think about how when we talk about creating or co-creating, we talk about putting a feeling and an emotion with it as well. And so for my interpretation is that when we have feeling behind it, that is what is helping raise our vibration, because that feeling is a higher vibration of love or having something happy, joy, whatever, than not having it. So we feel that we have it, and so we are then raising our vibration towards it.
Yes. So what's important for me to remember in that context is consciousness has three components. At least that's what science is telling us right now. There's awareness. There's the middle one, which out of my mind right now, and motivation.
Right.
And when we have awareness about something, we begin to activate ourselves around that. And the more we activate ourselves around that, the more energy, the more emotion, the more feeling we have around that, the more likely it is we're going to have the motivation to do something, to get it, to build it, to create it, to call somebody, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's important to think of these three levels. We don't need the names, but we need to know what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's lots of things we're aware of going through the day that there's no activation at all. Oh, the word is arousal. Yeah. So what I say, I still have a memory. It just takes longer sometimes.
Well, and the word contemplation came to mind to me as well, right? Because I think contemplation is also like a next level of awareness.
Well, so contemplation for me, so if we think of our consciousness and we think of awareness, science says we basically have two spotlights that we can put our attention on, put our awareness on. When I go into contemplation, I'm putting both of those spotlights on one thing. And that heightens my awareness around that thing.
Okay.
So yes, then I might be more aroused at that point, have more energy around that. And then get enough energy. Like I just talked about dark chocolate. I'm starting to get like, I think I want to go find some dark chocolate. And eventually we're motivated to do something. But
Yeah.
so what I really like about the teachings in Centers for Spiritual Living is, and this goes way back when it was religious science, pray and move your feet. The move your feet is the activity, the action.
Absolutely.
So I need to act in order to fulfill whatever it is that my awareness is focused on.
Mm-hmm.
That's such an important part of everything that we do, is that we get an idea, but if we don't follow it up with an action, if we don't do something with it, it's just wishful thinking, and
Yep.
it's not going to go anywhere. We
Yep.
have to. I remember hearing a lecture by the Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith when I was graduating at CSL, and he said the reason Jesus could walk on water is because he got out of the boat. And I think for me, it's like that action, right? Like we could do a whole lot more if we got our feet moving and got our butts up out of our chairs and actually, treat and move your feet, right? Pray and move your feet.
Yeah.
Really important part of
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah, that's the saying. Treat and move your feet. Yes.
Treat and move your feet.
Yes.
Yeah. Our word for prayer is treatment.
Yeah, and it's probably more accurate than the word pray in unity.
Mm-hmm.
I think so, because we're treating our mind to know something bigger, brighter. We're working in mind to consciously create some new pattern within our thoughts, which then is going to impact the way we live, act, and be in the world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Every now and again, I get unity people calling me up going, I don't want prayer, I want treatment. It's like, okay.
Well, and that's because a lot of unity people don't really understand unity prayer when it's done according to the teachings. In which case, it is more like treatment.
Yes. It really is. It really is.
But boy, don't try to change within unity the name of that thing from prayer to treatment.
You'll be in so much trouble.
I'd be like Jesus. I'd be crucified.
Oh my goodness.
Oh wow.
Oh, I think all of us get crucified on occasion.
Oh yeah. Well,
as we expand the boundaries.
So something else we were talking about before the show was how we create our own issues, and instead of going back to the beginning to see what started it, we treat the symptom. And then that causes something else, and we'll treat that symptom. And so we just keep building on treating symptoms rather than going back to cause.
Yeah.
Now, and one of the things that you said, which I would love to discuss more, is today's solutions cause tomorrow's problems.
Yes. Well, first of all, haven't we noticed that?
Mm-hmm.
So I come up with a solution, it's working. Then I notice that as a result of that solution, there's now a problem. And so, gosh, I'm having, maybe while I'm talking here, I'll think of a good example. And that happens mostly because we don't go back to the unadulterated divine idea or principle that was used to manifest this thing that now isn't working. And so it's not working. Instead of going back to cause, which would be the divine idea or principle in my language, or power in the case of 12 powers, if I don't go back there, I'm starting from a place that there is already differentiation, and it already contains some of the error that gives rise to the first solution that didn't work.
Right.
So this is why when I'm teaching prayer, or we can say in religious science or Centers for Spiritual Living, when I teach treatment, it's all, so we say, go back to source, right?
Mm-hmm.
Problem with that, it's too vague. If you tell some people go back to source, they just think it's going back to God and they don't know what to do with it. And then that brings, I have to bring it up. That's vague. And what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. And so what is God? Well, it's principle, it's law. So it's going back to the germ, the seed principle in its purest state, and then using that to manifest something, and now doing it differently than I did to get the result that I didn't like. That's essentially it.
Yeah, I think when we focus on source rather than on the problem, we begin to see better results. I like Emma Curtis Hopkins, how she talks about good rather than using the word God so much, going the word good. We're seeking good, and that has less negative energy around it than the word God does sometimes. So, she really, and I mean, she was talking about that a long time ago.
But she couldn't predict what happens when that word is used in our time. And mostly what that does is people response to it is bad, that the good has an opposite. And so that gets in the way of their understanding. And I no longer really like to use the word source for this thing, whatever it is. I like to think of it as a resource, because it's something we use, and that's not new to me. So in all of Charles Fillmore's writings, he never directly says God is source, but he implies that. But there is a sentence where he says God is resource. I like that. So the metaphor I use is, when we're manifesting or creating, it's like if I go into my kitchen now, I can find in the closet and the refrigerator, or in my pantry and my refrigerator, all the ingredients to make a cake. But we could wait to the end of time, and those ingredients would not put themselves together to make a cake. It takes consciousness to do that. And if you're a bad baker, you'll get a bad cake. If you're a good baker, you'll get a good baker. You get the picture?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's whatever consciousness we're bringing to those principles, those divine ideas, and learning how to learning what they are, and then doing it consciously. And then today's solution will tend not to create tomorrow's problems.
And I like how you also refer to the 12 powers as principles.
Yes. So they are those 12 are principles, and they are divine ideas. And Chuck, or Charles, gave them another name when he called them powers, because those were the 12 that he specifically associated with the manifestation of humankind. But they're just as much principles and divine ideas as the principle of generosity, or the principle of benevolence, or the principle, one that people eyes go up, the principle of force, which sounds horrible, but it's our ability to push things along, which we need, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
With power. I think power has been used in a really negative way a lot, but the power that's within us is so infinite and strong. Like, we have the ability to use it consciously, and it's not about exerting power over somebody else, right?
Well, so
misuse.
That's true. And the thing is, just like with the cake ingredients don't have the ability to tell me how to make a cake. So the power of power, the power of dominion, doesn't have the ability to tell me how to use it. Okay. Now, I like to call it dominion. And that's our personal authority over ourselves. And we can misuse it in certain situations to have authority over others. Now, the situations that's proper are with children and maybe with elderly adults. And it's also the power that gives us agency, our ability to do, in a way.
Yeah. And you talk about that as well. I think you have a diagram where you show sort of the overuse of a principle, in the sort of the good area, and then using it in the not so good area. But that takes me back to this thing that we say that is everything is all good, and I think just like power, people may misunderstand that. And you mentioned that, you said the problem with that is people think there's a contrast of the opposite.
Yes.
And that's not what it's meant when, did you say Emma Curtis Hopkins says that everything is, God is good. It means all encompassing of everything that is, both the shadow side and the light side.
Yeah. And in the Revealing Word, which is Unity's little dictionary, there's an entry under all good, because we talk about God being good all the time, all good. What was meant by that is the principle of benevolence, the principle of benevolence. And you can use benevolence in a multitude of ways. I mean, so in the extreme, everyone get a grip now. What Putin is doing right now, Putin thinks it's good.
Yes, he does.
Right? So he's using benevolence to do that. But benevolence, the principle, has no power or capacity to make anyone use it anyway. So every one of these principles or divine ideas are simply, we could call them attributes, is one thing. We could call them concepts.
Yeah.
And the concepts can be used any way according to the consciousness. It's like if you had a piano. If a baby sits down to play the piano, you get one sound. If I sat, you get another one. If a concert pianist got it, you get another one. The piano is the same for all three. It's the consciousness we're bringing to these that are so, so important.
Right. Yeah.
Our individual perception of things determines our viewpoint.
Yes.
And we will really fight for it.
Yes. Well, so Myrtle famously said, call it all good.
Yeah. And
people think that means if you have cancer or if you have AIDS or if you broke your leg, you're to call it good. Well, it doesn't. She wouldn't be saying the broken leg or the cancer or whatever disease you have is good. What she was saying is when we approach it now with a consciousness of benevolence, a consciousness of generosity, we will use whatever it is to manifest something good, to manifest a blessing. And it's important, I think, to have that distinction. So I think people leave New Thought because they hear these things that are really memes that don't have the depth for someone to understand what they are.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I know for myself, like in reading Myrtle Fillmore's letters, it was life-changing for me. She's so clear in her understanding of this divine presence. And last year when I went to the Unity Convention, I had a healing. And it was when I got on board the plane to head down there, I thought, hey, if Myrtle could heal her life, surely I can do it now. And that happened while I was there. I went from having the inability to walk without a walker to being fully mobile. And it happened like that. But there wasn't an opposing idea, right? It's like in the moment, because I'd been doing treatment and stuff about it for years. But in the moment that I went, wait a minute, and I accepted in my own self that, wait a minute, this can happen. And there wasn't that opposite, there wasn't that disbelief that popped in. There was just this awareness that, this can happen. And Cheryl was with me. I walked into the convention hall in the morning and walked out at noon perfectly fine. And it's, it's the mind builds the body.
Yeah. So may I suggest something a little different there?
Sure.
And that would be all that treatment you were doing prior to your healing culminated in that moment.
Absolutely.
when you healed yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
Some people say, well, none of that helped. Oh, yes, it did. You were slowly shifting your consciousness. And then you arrive at that moment. Bingo.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
because the doctors said it was incurable. It could only ever get worse.
Yeah.
And it's like, are we believing in the doctor or are we believing in something else? And yeah, it was all those years of going, no, I can do this. I can do this. But it was that moment of when all of a sudden, all of the doubt disappeared.
Yes.
And, that was that moment of clarity. And that's a profound moment.
It is. And you were preparing that soil, so to speak.
All
right?
along.
Yep.
Yep. Pulling the weeds,
It's kind of like when a new star appears and they're like 30 years old, but we never talk about everything he or she did to get to that point, right?
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
It didn't just happen in a moment. It was an
Yes.
evolution.
Well, and so with healing, it can happen that way, but
yes.
sometimes it doesn't. Well, and it didn't happen that way with Myrtle either.
Mhm.
She worked with herself at
she
least
worked
2
at it.
years.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She worked at it for a while. Yeah, I actually recorded her prayer so that I could listen to it.
yeah.
Which, again, it's, there's something about hearing the words that
Mhm.
sometimes can be really, really helpful. So,
Mhm.
yeah, there's a process in healing, and it's about the shift in consciousness that might take us a week and it might take us 20 years.
Yes.
However it happens, it happens.
Mhm.
That's what's
Yeah.
exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I
And I
remember when the doctor gave me my diagnosis of HIV in 1987. He said,
Mhm.
Paul, get your life in order. You're going to be dead in 2 years. And I said, there's a greater mind than yours. And I'm going to depend on that one.
Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Love that answer.
A good friend of mine had full-blown AIDS and was dying. And I sat down with him. I'd picked him up at the hospital, and there wasn't much more they could do. This was in the early 90s, I think, mid 90s. No, early 90s. And we were chatting, and I said, there's this thing that I do. Maybe I could do it with you. Are you open to that? I was talking about treatment.
Sure.
And he went, yeah, he said, I've never been afraid of dying. But he said, all my life I was afraid of living.
Mm-hmm.
And this diagnosis was the best thing. This disease was the best thing that ever happened to me because I realized how loved I am
Mm-hmm.
and how I want to live. And so we did treatment together, and he healed so rapidly. It was like within 2 weeks, he'd gained 18 pounds. Within 4 months, he was back to work as a hairstylist. And it's like, when I look at that, it was his going, oh, wait a minute, I'm willing to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he just created a whole new life for himself that was so remarkable. But it was that one decision like, hey, life is good. Let me do more of that.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Excellent.
He just, it was remarkable just to watch that transformation and to hear him go, you know what, this can be different.
Yeah. And it's an honor to be in the presence of somebody when they do that.
Oh my gosh, is it ever?
And humbling too, I would say. Yeah.
Very humbling, yes. And I know that, I pray with lots of people or do treatment with lots of people. I know it's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It's all about their receptivity to whether or not, and I will only ever pray about their request.
Yeah.
I never presume that I know what somebody wants. I would never do that. But it's exciting to see that kind of transformation happen.
Mhm.
Yes,
And
indeed. Yes, indeed.
it's a beautiful thing. It's part of this work that just makes it so rewarding.
And we don't make the opposite wrong either.
No,
Yeah.
we don't.
Yeah. So I have a question, Paul. If we use her walker to get through the airport quickly again, will that undo anything?
I don't think so, as long as she knows the context in which she's using it.
So
Even
there
a
you go,
wheelchair.
Bobs.
Like traveling with me because
Oh my God, it was like zip in and out and in the back way and out the front way. It was just like amazing. And we were there.
No lineups, no fuss, no muss.
Well, you know what? The good thing is that we are booked already to go to convention, which is in June, and we are flying directly, so we won't
Wonderful.
need to do
That'll be
that.
so much
this
better
time.
than last
So
time.
much better. And I won't be there at all because I'm going to be, I've been asked to speak at Unity of San Francisco during that week. So
Oh,
I'm not going to be
I
there.
love San Francisco. What a great city.
It is
Oh,
indeed.
my best.
And it's good to have friends that can invite you and you get a free trip to San Francisco.
Oh, how
That makes it
wonderful!
even better.
Yeah.
That makes it even better.
I've never been there, but I would love to one
Oh, it's
day.
Yep.
phenomenal.
Mhm.
So we're down to our last 5 minutes.
Okay.
And so what I would like to ask Paul is, what do you think you would like to leave people with as we end this conversation?
So for one for sure, that they're more powerful than they ever imagined.
Mm,
And the next thing is they have 100% agency in their life. No one, no event, no thing can make you think or believe anything. That whatever you believe, whatever you feel, whatever you do are all your choices, even if it seems differently.
Mhm.
And knowing so my first book was called Point of Power, and it was a double entendre. So there's the point of power, and then each of us is
yes.
a point of power in our own right.
Mhm.
And learning that no one makes us think or feel anything gives us such freedom.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
So
Awesome.
those are probably the most important things I would put. Look at that. It came up right away. I call that book the book of my heart because it was my first book, and I just sat down and wrote it 3 hours every week, and it was done. So there's a lot of great information in there still.
Mhm.
It has aged very well. Let's put it that way.
Nice. Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Cheryl, any final thoughts?
I would say just listen to Reverend Dr. Paul. He knows what he's talking about.
Well, then you have to go to like YouTube and see what other people have posted, right? This would be a good time though to promote. Every week, every Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, I send out an email that promotes what I'm doing, but it's mostly to promote something I call the absolute word. I take the Sunday version of Unity's daily word and I put it in oneness language.
I love it.
It's free. Okay.
Yes.
You just write to me at alberthasselbeck@gmail.com and you can get it for free every week.
Yes. And we are so grateful at Unity Kitchener, Paul. We use that in our service every Sunday.
Wonderful.
So thank you.
And I'm grateful that Unity has given me permission to do that with the Sunday word as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Used with permission, as they say.
Yeah.
It's so important. Oneness language is so important because everything else is confusing.
Yeah. So the thing is that the daily word is not written for Unity people per se. It's written for Unity people at a certain level and everybody else. And so I found there was a need for people who have expanded to this idea of oneness.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really important. And I think that's what we find in your books as well. I know in the 12 Powers and Heart-Centered Metaphysics that the oneness language is very clear. You use it clearly in all your classes as well. And I think that is really essential there because healing the division, that idea of separation is so important. And it can only happen when we make use of oneness language ongoing.
Absolutely, because it undoes all that separation language.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Reverend Dr. Paul, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're a wonderful guest. Cheryl, my beloved sister, you're my wonderful co-host. I love you so much. And I can never do that. Anyway, I'm a little dyslexic. I don't know.
We got to have fun.
Exactly.
Enjoy my heart.
Oh, well, this has been a blast. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for being here, and have a most wonderful week. Be sure to subscribe and like and send us questions, comments, conundrums that you get from these shows at spiritcafeshow@gmail.com. Yeah, I got it right. All right, everybody. See you next time. Have
Bye.
a great week. Love you.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.